In September of 1787, at the end of a grueling constitutional convention, a popular story describes a woman who approached Benjamin Franklin as he exited Independence Hall. "Well, doctor," she asked, "what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin responded with signature wit, "A republic, if you can keep it." Amidst the craziness of politics in our country today, many of us have spent a great deal of time pondering the state of our country and have doubted the representatives who lead us in government. Have we, in fact, been loyal custodians of the government organized by the framers in Philadelphia, or are we failing to keep our republic as Franklin hoped? American members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe we are blessed to live in a nation where the structure of government is divinely inspired. Establishing the freedoms that our culture holds dear, protected speech, religious liberty, the rights of due process, and the value of individual equality, created an environment where the gospel of Jesus Christ was restored and its roots were planted, allowing the gospel to flourish and spread to every corner of the earth. Doctrine and Covenants 10180 reads, quote, "And for this purpose I have established the constitution of this land by the hands of wise men whom I raised up unto this very purpose, and redeemed the land by the shedding of blood," close quote. And President Wilford Woodruff explained, quote, "Those men who laid the foundation of this American government were the best spirits the God of heaven could find on the face of the earth. They were choice spirits and were inspired of the Lord," close quote. How amazing is knowing the very existence of the founders we celebrate, the events of the American Revolution, and the creation of the documents that are the foundation of our government were all guided by God's hand. Good government is indeed a blessing from a loving God. President Dallin H. Oaks, himself a lifetime scholar of American government and laws, spoke about the Constitution in his April 2021 General Conference talk, defending our divinely inspired Constitution. Just months after the controversial election in 2020 and the January 6th attack at the Capitol, and during the tail end of the pandemic, Elder Oaks felt it was necessary to highlight the divine workings of the American system of government. He focused on 5 principles found within our Constitution, which he believes are divinely inspired. The first being popular sovereignty, or the source of government power is the people. He said, quote, "In a time when sovereign power was universally assumed to come from the divine right of kings or from military power, attributing sovereign power to the people was revolutionary. Philosophers had advocated this, but the United States Constitution was the first to apply it. The Constitution established a constitutional democratic republic where the people exercised their power through their elected representatives." At first glance, a lesson in American civics from an apostle of the church is a welcome reminder of our unique freedoms and traditions. But when one takes his words in the context of current events, it sounds a warning. When the basic tenets of our republic are threatened, the existence and power of our faith is at stake. Without doubt, our country has faced constitutional challenges before, but today's threats seem to strike at the heart of these inspired principles in a way that is veiled with false authority, prejudices, and outdated traditions. The United States Constitution was the first written document in history to give ordinary citizens the authority to elect officials to represent them in government. This power, at best, was considered radical. At worst, was absolutely frightening. How could the masses, many uneducated and uninformed, be trusted to choose representatives who would protect the common good? To minimize risk, the skittish framers devised indirect elections for the president through the Electoral College, and for senators through the state governments. Also, voting rights were extended largely to white male landowners, leaving well over half the population out of the equation. Yet, no matter the document's original shortcomings, establishing the power for ordinary citizens to vote made the long-considered idea of popular sovereignty a reality. Despite its limits, the Constitution's freedoms and protections allowed Joseph Smith Jr. to organize a church just 42 years after the new government's adoption. Early church leaders celebrated the Constitution's divine foundations, yet anticipated the fulfillment of its promise for all. The prophet Joseph Smith said that, quote, "The Constitution of the United States is a glorious standard. It is founded in the wisdom of God. It is a heavenly banner," close quote. Brigham Young taught the Constitution, quote, "laid the foundation, and it was for the after generations to rear the superstructure upon it," close quote. President Oakes quotes J. Reuben Clark saying, quote, "The Constitution was not a fully grown document. On the contrary, we believe it must grow and develop to meet the changing needs of an advancing world," close quote. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are encouraged to be active voting citizens, although the church itself has made a point not to endorse any one political party or candidate. President Oakes said, quote, "There are many political issues, and no party, platform, or individual candidate can satisfy all personal preferences. Each citizen must therefore decide which issues are most important to him or her at any particular time. Then members should seek inspiration on how to exercise their influence according to their individual priorities. This process will not be easy. It may require changing party support or candidate choices, even from election to election," close quote. Church leaders urge us to look for good leaders along the political spectrum. Eternal truths and hope are found in individuals who serve well, not in partisan platforms. Though in today's electoral landscape, confusion is ever present. With endless mudslinging and misdirection, it's no wonder so many of us choose not to vote or wish that we had a none of the above choice on the ballot. Amidst the chaos, how can a good member of the church vote in a way that will best fulfill the divine purpose of government? What priorities are most important? What traits should we look for in our leaders? George Washington, in his inaugural address, pointed toward the need for divine influence in our choices. The propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal ruler of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained, close quote. We can look to heaven's rule as the example of order and right. As true in many things, the Lord of heaven and earth, Christ, is the model. But working with political candidates who fall short of his attributes, we may seek more guidance. Doctrine and Covenants 98:10 identifies 3 qualities of good leaders. Quote, "Wherefore honest men and wise men should be sought for diligently, and good men and wise men ye should observe to uphold. Otherwise, whatsoever is less than these cometh of evil," close quote. Elder Ezra Taft Benson, in his April 1976 conference talk, The Constitution, a Glorious Standard, elaborated on this scripture saying, quote, "Goodness, wisdom, and honesty are 3 qualities of statesmanship, qualities this country needs more than ever before," close quote. It is no coincidence that these qualities echo themes of civic virtue the founders held as crucial in the democratic republic they created. Understood as the traits which good citizens and leaders possess, mastering civic virtue was an essential part of the education in the founding era. Individuals who demonstrate traits such as goodness, wisdom, and honesty, as well as fairness, morality, courage, and humility showed civic virtue. And often the framers found their model of civic virtue in George Washington. Elected president of the 1787 Constitutional Convention unanimously, Washington believed fostering civic virtue was central to the Constitution's mission. He urged, quote, "Let us raise a standard to which the wise and honest can repair," close quote. Washington's vision was more than just talk. His goodness, honesty, and wisdom were so respected that the framers modeled the executive branch, outlined in Article 2, with him in mind. In his inaugural address, Washington defined the honorable qualities he and other good leaders should possess. Measuring political candidates according to the traits Washington identified provides insights into what attributes a good leader should have. First, Washington said, quote, "No local prejudices or attachments, no separate views nor party animosities will misdirect the comprehensive and equal eye which ought to watch over this great assemblage of communities and interests," close quote. Washington, in his speeches and writings, was clear in his fear of parties or factions that could disrupt the government's operations. Today, political parties are an integral part of our election system, yet this standard still applies. We require leaders who have an equal eye over all citizens, regardless of political affiliation or other identifiers. A leader puts the common good before self-interest. They seek to understand differing points of view and open their ideas to compromise instead of sticking to the party line regardless of society's needs. They give every citizen a voice at the table and refuse to allow certain interests to be marginalized or ignored. Balancing fairness on one side, Washington then asserted that, quote, "The foundations of our national policy will be laid in the pure and immutable principles of private morality," close quote. A code of morals can be subjective and viewed differently through the lens of time. However, leaders who adhere to universal moral behaviors like honesty, integrity, humility, and restraint deserve our support over candidates who lie, demean or hurt others, selfishly brag, or act impulsively. Elder Benson, in his April 1972 conference talk entitled "Civic Standards for the Faithful Saints," said, quote, "God, the Father of us all, uses the men of the earth, especially good men, to accomplish his purposes. It has been true in the past, it is true today, it will be true in the future," close quote. Elder Benson knew good people, men and women, are allies who sustain constitutional principles and demonstrate civic duty beyond the church walls. Yet we should be wary when candidates use their positions of power to win favorable treatment or to gain influence for selfish ends. Finally, Washington declared that the leader of a free government should, quote, "be exemplified by all the attributes which can win the affections of its citizens and command the respect of the world," close quote. Charisma and timing certainly play a role here, but decorum, reverence, and grace is crucial. Good leaders sense the needs of their community, celebrate and mourn with them, and honor those who sacrifice. They are gracious when meeting other leaders, both allies and enemies, but avoid fawning over them to gain favor. They advocate for their constituents, defend them, and listen to them. Empathy and fairness, morality and integrity, character and respect. Washington's profile exemplifies good leadership even today. Our church leaders similarly see the value in civic virtue. In June 2023, the First Presidency issued a letter restating the church's neutrality in political matters and reminding members that various candidates and political parties embody principles compatible with the gospel. The 2023 letter echoed phrasing found in similar statements from 2016 and 2020, but it was released at the beginning of the election cycle, not immediately prior to a federal election. Also, it had a marked addition. Members should study the candidates carefully and vote for those who have demonstrated integrity, compassion, and service to others, regardless of party affiliation. Merely voting a straight ticket or voting based on tradition without careful study of the candidates and their positions on important issues is a threat to democracy and inconsistent with revealed standards, close quote. Note the attributes: integrity, compassion, and service to others. Civic virtue is as cherished here as it was by the founders of our country. As covenant members, we are given the gift of discernment through the Spirit, but we must be willing to examine the character of those who seek office. The First Presidency warns that failing to research the candidates is a threat to democracy. The First Presidency's statement also rebukes voting according to tradition. Many saints view particular political parties as good or evil, and many have always voted the party line. Elder Benson, in his April 1976 talk, said, quote, "May we select only those who understand and will adhere to constitutional principles. To do so, we need to understand these principles ourselves," close quote. No longer can we trust a party or candidate to automatically uphold the constitutional principles we cherish. We must be aware when ideas drift away from the inspired principles of our founding documents and hold our elected officials responsible to uphold them. To be good stewards of a democratic government, the citizens must be able to recognize when our leaders stray. If knowledge of our democracy is necessary to uphold the Lord's revealed standards, the adversary is sure to challenge our understanding of these principles by creating confusion. For example, plans for an administration based on Christian values gain support from seemingly moral leaders, yet supporters often treat others as less than equal children of God. Many politicians claim to uphold traditional family values, but live in a way that mocks the principles they promote. Proposed controls over reproductive rights, whose noble aim is to protect unborn life, become so restrictive that they put women's health, safety, and privacy at risk. Cheating in business, assaulting women, conspiring to retain power despite the votes of the people, and ensnaring citizens into legal actions to support personal ambitions. All these offenses are an affront to civic virtue. No matter how great it sounds, popular sovereignty has problems. Voters are easily swayed by popular trends, social media, and those that warp truth to win followers to their selfish aspirations. We become immune to hearing about politicians behaving badly and overlook candidates' immorality. Political players spin sensational stories that tear at our sense of fairness or disgust us. Meanwhile, as these reports go viral, we are distracted from critical issues not being addressed. And if a candidate's standing is challenged, they cry foul and blame others for their loss. President Oaks clarified that sovereign power in the people does not mean that mobs or other groups of people can intervene to intimidate or force government action. This is especially poignant considering the political unrest just months before he gave his talk. President Oaks said, quote, "God has given his children moral agency, the power to decide and act. The most desirable condition for the exercise of that agency is maximum freedom for men and women to act according to their individual choices," close quote. But when individuals react to lawful changes with violence, when fair elections are destabilized by unfounded rumors, or when leaders misrepresent their duties to thwart government proceedings or undermine peaceful transitions of power, moral agency is threatened. Our republic safeguards liberty for all people. These rights are so encompassing, they allowed the restoration of the gospel and still permit actions contrary to the gospel. Let me stress that. The rights that allowed the gospel to be restored also grant protection to individuals who choose ways contrary to the gospel. In our inspired republic, we need to be prepared to lose. Our candidates won't always win, our ballot measures may fail, and we won't always vanquish our political foes armed with truth and righteousness. President Oaks said, quote, "What else are faithful Latter-day Saints to do? We must pray for the Lord to guide and bless all nations and their leaders. This is part of our article of faith. Being subject to presidents or rulers, of course, poses no obstacle to our opposing individual laws or policies. It does require that we exercise our influence civilly and peacefully within the framework of our constitutions and applicable laws. On contested issues, we should seek to moderate and unify." Close quote. Former federal judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals, Thomas B. Griffin, described being greatly inspired by Oaks' ideas. In the September 23, 2022 Church News, he said, quote, "I don't believe that I've ever heard a more articulate statement of what it means to defend and support the Constitution than the one President Oaks gave in that talk when he said, 'On contested issues, we should seek to moderate and to unify.' If you want a template to measure your support for the Constitution, whether you are supporting and defending the Constitution, there it is. We need to ask ourselves, does that describe me?" Close quote. Truly, the best influence we can have for good is our example. As members of the church, we are natural bridge builders. It is not our job to push our righteousness on others, but we can help others discover it through positive experiences. I am reminded of John Dickinson, one of the richest and most influential men to live during the founding era. As a delegate to the Second Continental Congress, he was the author of the Olive Branch Petition, sent to George III as a final attempt to reconcile with Britain before all-out revolution broke out. During the debates leading to the writing of the Declaration of Independence, he was an unmoving voice against revolution, desiring to pursue a peaceful end to the hostilities that were erupting. When it became clear his viewpoint was to be the losing one, he abstained from voting for the Declaration because he knew the importance of consensus, yet his conscience did not allow him to vote for it. He abstained and let the opposing side win. At this point, he could have retreated to his farm and lived out a bitter life, upset that he had lost his influence. But his story doesn't end here. Once the Declaration was issued, Dickinson supported the fledgling country with all his efforts. He was one of 2 delegates who served in battle during the Revolution. He was the primary author of the Articles of Confederation. He served as president of both the states of Pennsylvania and Delaware, and he was an advocate for the small states in the Constitutional Convention in 1787. Dickinson showed us that we do not always need to agree to support one another. Like Dickinson, we may look at some of the things the government tolerates or even protects and wonder how our country can be so wrong. We debate the control of guns, immigration, LGBTQ+ rights, and even our own bodies, but our republic protects the views of all. As part of this evolving, growing American experiment, we can advocate for our ideas and affect change, but like Dickinson, we must be willing to love our country even when we lose. We must accept that existing imperfections are not reason to reject our government, and instead embrace the ideas that allow diversity to thrive, including beliefs that began with a prayer in a grove of trees in 1820, about 30 years after the acceptance of our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Elder Oaks said, quote, "As disciples of Jesus Christ, we are to be examples of how to interact with others, especially when we have differences of opinion. One of the easiest ways to identify a true follower of Jesus Christ is how compassionately that person treats other people," close quote. Being a follower of Christ and being compassionate may seem to go together, but it can be a challenge. It is a balance to be diligent in protecting our strong beliefs while shunning hate. We must temper standing for righteousness with Christ-like love. Elder Quentin L. Cook said in the October 2021 conference, quote, "As we rely on the atonement of Jesus Christ, he can help us endure our trials, sicknesses, and pain. We can be filled with joy, peace, and consolation. All that is unfair about life can be made right through the atonement of Jesus Christ." Close quote. Ultimately, preserving our republic and protecting our faith comes down to heeding Franklin's admonition, "A republic if you can keep it." The Union will be safeguarded when citizens vote with knowledge and intent and refuse to fall for the adversary's tricks and traps. Civic education must be cultivated, and methods to analyze sources in the ever-changing information age must be taught. Sustaining popular sovereignty requires we make decisions mindfully amid political chaos. As covenant members of the Church of Jesus Christ, we have been promised gifts of inspiration and discernment. I believe that as we seek the traits of wisdom, honesty, and goodness as described by the prophets, as we value civic virtue and morality, being free from prejudice and commanding respect as demonstrated by Washington, and as we hold officials accountable by conscious, educated choices at the ballot box, we will be prepared to claim our sovereignty as keepers of our republic.